So what are you saying, people? Is another episode of The Social Worker and the Mentor. So guys, listen, I keep saying to you, Rob's told you, see the little button there? See it? The like, subscribe and share. Just keep pressing it. It's free. Like, we know it's getting to Christmas. Just like, subscribe and share. You know, thank you so much for watching what me and Rob are doing. You know, it's a different format, different layout. But if you do want to come onto our podcast, you know, email thesocialworkerandmentor@gmail.com. Right, so guys, listen. See, for the longest time, I've been trying to get senior leaders to come on the podcast, yeah? Did I not come through? I've got 2 senior leaders, yeah, I've managed to get on the podcast, yeah? So I want to start. If you can introduce yourself, please.
I am Bob Bilby.
What's your role?
Oh, my role, I'm a director of children's services.
Thank you. Introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Laura Eden. I'm a director of children's services in a London borough.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So good to have you both on the podcast. Do you know what? The reason I wanted to have you both on the podcast, because I guess I kind of want to see and get a flavour of what is it like to be a senior leader of a local authority. Like, what's a day in the life like, Bob, being a senior leader?
Gosh, it's pretty busy, but it's, in a way, I just see it's just amplified. Like when you're a social worker and then you're doing your work and then you're moving up as you go up. It's a similar thing, really, but it is a responsibility.
And how much emails do you get a day?
Just so many. I couldn't even tell you, but a good example, when I'm in the office and I'm in meetings and I'm a bit anal, respond to all my emails. By the time I get home, which is only 60 minutes from where I work, is I can have 80 odd emails. So it's about dealing with all that and reading them and also responding. Yeah.
What about yourself, Laura?
Day in the life of a DCS.
Yeah.
Different. Everything's different. The huge variety. I agree with Bob. It's like your social work caseload will always be the variety of things. And it's the same as a DCS. So I'll visit a children's centre, pop into a school, chair a strategic meeting on children's mental health or on domestic abuse. Might get a call from Ofsted about a case, have a supervision with one of my staff, and do a lot of emails. So basically that it's very, very varied, but I've always been the type to treat it as a privilege. It's a big privilege to be a senior leader and be responsible for so many children in a borough.
Yeah. And can I ask, in terms of like both of your journeys, did you both, like from the very beginning, say, you know what, actually I aspire, this is where I want to go from the very beginning? You know, Bob?
No.
Like, what was your stomping ground? What was your origin?
My original, I believe it or not, I trained as a dancer and had an injury.
Really?
Yeah, and then a ballet dancer. And then what happened was that, years ago there was called intermediate treatment. And so you could do a lot of that work in the summer. And so at the time, you got to think back when I was coming into it, was you didn't have a lot of men who were dancing, and so a lot of that work was doing, again with youth offending, doing dance.
Wow!
At Covent Garden and something. At the time, it was hip hop that the young people were into, and it was really just started that way, really, and then got into residential social work, and from there.
What about yourself, Laura? Your beginnings?
Yeah, I mean, I always knew that I wanted to be a social worker. I don't know how I knew about social work, but I saw when I was younger a lot of injustice in the world, an injustice around discrimination, inequality, and I always wanted to do something. And actually, I wanted to think about being a psychiatrist, but I don't think I was clever enough in terms of academic, and I don't have an academic background. But with social work, in those days, you couldn't go straight from school to social work. There weren't these frontline step up. You had to have, I think you had to be, first of all, it was 25, then they dropped it to like 22 or something in those days. So I did a degree in social policy and social science, and then you had to do a lot of voluntary work or a lot of work experience. Again, like Bob, residential, of residential. I mean, residential social work taught me so much, but it also got me through the course, because you can earn money waking nights, actually. And then going into college and studying, you have to put yourself through. So I always knew I wanted to be a social worker. And then when I was a social worker, after a few years, I started in youth justice and then went into child protection and family support. So I've mainly done the front end of social work.
Yeah.
And then it just so happened, I think people always saw me. I don't know why. I don't know what it was. People, you know, a manager would say, there's a senior prac role coming up. If you consider being a senior prac, you know, you get to manage a couple of staff and you get to have a complex caseload. And then it kind of just carried on from there. And after my third child, when I was a team manager, I was really finding it difficult to balance being on the front line and being home for the kids. They were 3 under 5, basically. And so someone said, well, why don't you take a sideways move, slightly up, in the QA unit? And it was, I thought I would not like it. I thought I'd miss frontline so much, and I did.
Yeah.
But that was it for me, you know, having the breadth and really seeing across from slightly outside frontline, but really influencing the system. I think made me think that I could be more senior. So I hadn't really thought about it. I love frontline social work. I love seeing kids. I'll do anything to see kids now. I think people on the front line think I'm completely mad, because any opportunity to meet one of my kids in care, or a care leaver, or someone, you know, receiving the service. But I think it just keeps you real, basically.
And think that kind of leads into Laura. I think probably because where I'm at team manager level at the moment, and I guess maybe we don't really kind of understand also the responsibility that you have as being senior leaders, because ultimately every single child within a local authority, you mentioned earlier about caseload, that as a DSC, you're responsible for every single child. So how important is it that you actually know every single case that's happening? Because obviously a lot of like the big decisions that are made, we would obviously have to come to you if it's for like, you know, a panel meeting. But how important is it that you are still in touch as DCSs with what's happening on the ground with the social work teams?
It is so important, but you can't know everything. What you've got to do is, like when you're building relationships with the family, you've got to build relationships with the staff and your system to understand and have grip, you know, what some leaders would call grip on the system. So you've got to understand how the system works, how the partnership works, how's your health services working, how are the police working, how are schools being inclusive or giving kids a sense of belonging. So you've got to know the general, because you can't know, you know, thousands and thousands of children. Saying that, there will be a few children who, I mean, some would describe them as really high risk. I describe them as high vulnerability, who you will know because, you know, they're in placements that you need to know about, or there's been such high concerns. But otherwise, you've got to trust the system, and you've got to build those collaborative relationships in order to trust the system.
What yourself, Bob?
Yeah, very, very similar. And also we have particular panels that I chair, you know, multidisciplinary panels and different panels. So I tend to, you know, I won't know every child, but quite a lot I'll know very well. And I work closely with team managers. I'm not somebody who's detached. I think it's important about practice. Again, it's that whole thing for me is about why, like you say, why you came into the work is actually I'm quite passionate about what we're doing. I also feel sometimes it's you've got to do that, because you've got to have people who can question you. Do you see what I'm saying? So I'm a great believer that, yes, process is important, but don't lose sight of the child in that. And often, because I'm reading a lot of information, or I'll read on a particular child or young person or a family, you can see sometimes like things have got lost. And I think it's important to have senior leaders who haven't lost sight of practice. Don't lose sight of what we came into the work for, because, you know, it is important. And I think if we're going to evolve, you know, that's why I welcome, you know, what I call new blood social workers, because they can bring different ideas, or maybe show you something that you hadn't really thought about before. So I'm a great believer about, I use the term, I'm an open mind as opposed to closed mind.
Yeah.
And I just need, so if you know, if it's going to resonate with me, it's about couch it in the mind of that child or that child's world, and don't forget that sometimes. Yeah.
Is there ever been a point where both of you, in terms of your positions, whereby there might be particular cases that you've just got kind of like a strong kind of emotion to it, and actually you're like, I know this is the kind of decision that I need to make, but I'm kind of thinking this way. Is there any been points where you've had so many dilemmas where you've had to maybe kind of second guess yourself, or maybe you've made a decision, maybe the outcome may not be correct, and you're like, actually, you know, upon reflection, maybe I should have gone this way. What's your thoughts? Because obviously, as social workers, we have to obviously make judgments. There's times whereby, you know, I can say as a team manager that I've made decisions. It hasn't necessarily gone.
Yeah.
The outcome hasn't produced what I've wanted.
Yeah.
But for yourselves as directors, I guess that's a bigger kind of pressure on yourselves, isn't it?
But you use the people around you.
Yeah.
So just because I'm the most senior person in the organisation doesn't mean I know the answers. And so you have to, as a leader, create psychologically safe spaces where you can be chairing panels.
Yeah.
And you are the most senior person, but you are by no means the most expert in the room. In fact, the team manager isn't the expert in the room. The social worker is. Because
Right.
the social worker lives and breathes and knows the child and knows the child lived experience. So I try, and it's difficult as a senior leader because you've got the title, basically.
Yeah,
I try and create a space where a social worker can say to me, that's not right.
Yeah.
You're not hearing what I'm saying for the child. That isn't, you're going to go down a road that's not going to be right for my kid. And so it's about how you create those cultures within the system that make it safe for people to speak up, because you'll go down the road. Having said that, if I see something that's not good enough, or if I see something that's amazing, I will say, this is amazing practice.
Yeah.
Is this endemic? Is this part of the system so amazing?
Yeah.
Go and look at 20 more cases or 20 more children or 20 more
Yeah.
families and bring me that. And the same way you find not great practice, you start going down the road is this a one-off? Because, okay, it's a one-off. Everyone makes the wrong decision.
Yeah.
And we move and we learn by that. And it's not intentional. And often it's not individual. It's a system issue. Or is this endemic and we need to do something about it?
What's your Bob?
Yeah, that's a good point. And I just think it's about recognising that we don't always have the answers, but like you, that's why I do think I go back to Eileen Munro's work, The Effective Child Protection, which is 2004, many years ago, where she actually spoke about that. And I always did when I was, you know, all the way going up, was listen to social workers. If somebody's not in agreement with that, you've got to unpick it, because I trained as a process recorder, which means, okay, I need to understand that. I guess what I'm saying is I have to be satisfied with I'm doing it with the best intentions, and really are thinking about that. But if someone's omitted something or not said something, because as you know, someone can bring something in that makes it, hang on a minute, this is all, I didn't realise that. And I think that's why, like you, I always want to know what practitioners are, because it will be a good indication, and then you've got to unpick that. And sometimes, as you know, you have to reach compromises sometimes and say, how do we sort of deal with that? But I think you have to have that space where you always allow people to have their sort of view, but not in a patronising way. It's about, as you said, sometimes we have to then have the final decision. But I'd like to think that I've done that, having consulted with the majority, you know, everybody there, and we've all arrived at that, and nobody leaves thinking, oh, I'm disappointed.
And I think what you've both said is important, because often when I've spoken to social workers, I mean, even when I kind of first qualified in the beginning, there were times whereby I remember, not where I'm at the moment, but in the beginning when I first got my first local authority, where, you know, you'd often feel, is my director detached from what's going on the ground? But I think it was so good to kind of hear from yourself, Laura and Bob, in terms of saying that kind of sharing of, not kind of sharing of power, but kind of sharing of expertise. Because I think for a lot of social workers, some don't really know how to, you know, how do I approach my director? Because actually you've got that management structure that I've got my team manager, service manager, head of service, and director. So how important is it for both of you to be very visual to the social worker? I know my first local authority, my director was always on like the 5th floor. Couldn't really see the director. Do you know what I mean? It's only if you had like a staff conference you'd see.
Yeah.
But how important is it that you're visual and that, you know, you sit with the social workers where they don't feel, I can't speak to Laura, I can't speak to Bob?
I mean, it's really important to be a visible leader. So you know, if you think about COVID, I was always, well, if my social workers are in, I'm in.
Yeah.
You know, I count myself as frontline, and that goes up the hierarchy. So it's really important to be visible because that's how you build relationships.
Yeah.
And that's how you build trust, and that's how you understand the system. There's no point me sitting on floors away, etc. So having said that, there's also a limit to, I can't just sit next to a social worker. First of all, that can be quite, I mean, it can be scary. You know, your boss's boss. Sitting next to you and thinking, oh, what should I say in this phone call? But also, it's not wholly necessary. What they need to understand is what the vision is.
Yeah.
That you're grounded, that you're child focused, and that if mistakes are made, that you run a learning organisation and you dig under what's happened and you move on from that and you make the system better. So I lead by that. I mean, I do sit in social work offices, and I do sit if there's no, if there's no desk and I'm sitting next to a social worker, I'm sitting next to a social worker. They find it weirder than me because I don't. In some ways, I don't accept the title has changed me in any way.
Yeah.
But clearly, it has because you are a figurehead of an organisation.
Yeah.
And so I find that harder to accept, but you know, I'm sure I'll come to terms with it at some point, or maybe I won't ever come to terms with it. Who knows? But you use your seniority when you need to. When you meet with a borough commander, when you meet with a senior leader in the ICB, you have to use your authority to get the best for the kids that the social workers are working with.
What about yourself, Bob?
Yeah, I do sit on the same floor as the social, and it's interesting, like you say, it's where you, I guess, where you feel most comfortable, really. We don't have officers, so there'd be no point about that. And I don't know how they kind of fit. Most people know me on the floor. They'll see me. They're not afraid to approach me. I think you're right. Some people might feel comfortable, but it's, I guess, where I work, there is no that's where you sit, and that's where I tend to sit. Really, you're with me, and again, it just feels different, but it keeps you in touch with practice because maybe you can hear things.
Yeah,
and it's not. I mean, I'm busy half the time, so you know what I mean. We still do a lot of stuff on Teams, so you've got headphones on.
Yeah,
but there is something quite nice about sitting, because at the end of the day, you, like you say, I am first and foremost a social worker.
Yeah.
So you with me? I'm passionate about practice. So sometimes, you know what I mean. When I talk, I don't. People know I'm really more interested in the case, really. And we have some really amazing social work practice.
But you have to also build relationships with your colleagues. So as a corporate director, it's no good me always being on the floor with social workers. I need to be building a relationship with the corporate director of housing.
That's right.
Because he needs stuff from me and I need stuff from him. Or I need to be close to HR or, inclusive economy or environment and regen, because you work together as a team as well.
How do you both manage your caseload? It's a very, very big and wide question, because when you think about it, your caseload is the whole borough, every single time. How do you balance your caseload? How do you balance family life with your role? Because we always talk about social workers burning out. Directors you must burn out.
Burn out. You will never burn out.
No, you must burn out, isn't it? You know, how do you manage it? Because I just want to know, how do you actually manage? Because the borough is your caseload.
So very little sleep.
Yeah.
Very little sleep, I would say. I don't need that much sleep, so I'm okay. In terms of family life, I've always strived wherever I can, and there's not evening meetings where I have to be somewhere, either at in care council or the corporate parenting board or scrutiny meetings. I will come home for 6:30. I will be with my kids till the youngest goes to bed. I've got older ones now, so they go to bed really late, and then I log on again. So that's how I balance it. If I want to do a school run, you can't do the job between 9 and 5.
Yeah.
There is absolutely there's no way about that. I don't like to work weekends, so I work late into the evening or early hours, and I don't expect that of others. But the level of seniority and the pay, actually, it's okay to expect that, and I think it is a privilege to be able to oversee such a system.
Yeah.
So I bear no grudge.
What about yourself, Bob?
I'm passionate about social work. So I think you're right. You get into. I don't expect others, but I've always said, and I'm also a reader, so I'll have books going on at the same time as doing that. But I've always been like that. You know it is, and I just think when my children were younger, and I had quite a lot of children, I was always there for them. You know, that's what you do.
Yeah.
And like you know, I've still got childcare responsible for one of my young grandson who lives with us, and I make time for him. You with me? And a bit like you. So people don't realise that actually I master it by I get home, sort the dinner and all that, and once they're settled, you can then sit and do some of the stuff that you're doing. So
I want to ask you both this is a deep question. Yeah, it's very, very deep. Yeah. One of the things in social work, it's always about kind of like reflection, and also about kind of like, I think for me, kind of learning to kind of, as a manager, being vulnerable, because obviously when you get into a position of leadership, sometimes people might think you're robotic and there isn't kind of like a vulnerable side to yourself. So in terms of like your roles, how important is it for you to be vulnerable, not in terms of your decision making, but just in terms of at least social workers seeing that, I'm a DSC, but I'm also human as well. Don't think that I kind of don't understand the pressures. How important is it to kind of like show a bit of vulnerability as a leader? It's a deep question. I know
it's very important. It is because it's being part of authentic leadership, and people can sniff it out if you're not authentic and you're not genuine.
Yeah, cool.
You don't want your leader breaking down the whole time. Then you're going to have no faith in their leadership. But you need vulnerability to say, I'm an imperfect leader. I will make mistakes. I don't know everything. Yeah. These types of situations might trigger me. Now, you don't need to tell the whole organisation that, but you need a trusted person that you can reflect with on decisions. It is really important to show vulnerability, but appropriately.
Yeah.
Right.
You don't just show it everywhere, but in certain situations with trusted people.
Yeah.
And it's part of collaborative leadership. It's not my head's better than everyone else's. It's that everyone's head put together will make the right decision for a child.
I want to jump on the back of that. Before I let you go in, Bob, you mentioned about collaborative leadership. Now, for me, I strive from that because I know that in my role being a TM, you have to lead your team. But I also understand the importance of that collaboration in terms of, not that there's not me and them, they know I'm the TM, but having that collaboration so that your team, what I'm basically trying to say is that they know that I'm leading, but I'm leading with you. So how important, Laura, is that? Because you're still the figurehead anyway to a degree, but how important is it for you to kind of share that within your leadership?
Well, it's because you're more senior, you're sharing ideas, you're sharing discussions, you're sharing reflections. There's a lot of shared risk, you're sharing risk. But actually, I am clear that the decision, I am ultimately accountable for the decision. Yeah. So unless I believe in the decision, then you start kind of wavering. Yeah. So collaborative leadership for me is, not coming up with all the ideas, not saying, right, we're going down this road, but really, an example would be at the moment, we've got to think about savings. We've got the local authorities are in financial crisis. We've got to think about savings. Yeah. Where do you go to think about savings? I could go into a darkened room and probably work out something myself, but it won't be as good unless I talk to children and young people, parents and carers, the whole staff workforce, and all the senior leadership team, and come up with something together, because my idea won't be as good as theirs, I believe.
For yourself, Bob.
Yeah,
It's a deep question, yeah.
Yeah, it is a deep question, but I think it goes back to that. It's actually you don't want to spill out everywhere. I don't think I'm that type of person anyway, but it is about being collaborative. That's a good word to use.
Yeah.
But actually, it is about that knowing who to go to and get that from. And actually, that you said as a team manager, you'll know within your team, the strengths within different people. So you'll know where to go and ask those people that. And sometimes it's thinking about that, because that helps you just maybe decide where you're going sometimes. And I think that's why for me the importance about not saying static and being sort of that what I guess it's that not my decision stands and that's how you go, because I think that's a poor way to operate.
Yeah.
It really is about saying, actually, I don't know all this, but as you just said, there's a lot of people in the local authority who you can go and ask.
Yeah.
And you can also question yourself. But actually, if you do that amongst people and it can be all the way down sometimes, is just asking that, because it helps you form that view. And I'm very much about, at the end of the day, is that reasonable, how you've arrived at that. So I often think it's rooted in law, because one of my qualifications was law, and the whole thing about reasonableness. And so how did I arrive at that? And I was taught, don't just shrug your shoulders or say, well, I roll a dice and that's how I got it. But actually it's about, I've thought about this collaboratively. If you've got everybody there, this is what we're doing. And there are times when you the situation you're faced with is difficult. Because if you think society is evolving, everything evolves.
Yeah.
You're faced with some things that you think, some dilemmas sometimes. But I always believe that actually, as long as I could stand in a court of law and say, this is how I arrived at this thinking, is that unreasonable, or is it, is that, I kind of get it. And who have I worked with to do that? So we don't work in isolation.
But there will be sometimes, as a senior leader, where you've got to be directive. I mean, the start of lockdown, for example, we went into a meeting and I started being, a collaborative leader. And then one of my senior managers, stop, Laura, you need to now direct. Stop being so collaborative, because we needed quick responses. Everyone needed to know what they're doing. No one knew
Clear
what they're doing,
direction.
and it's not about taking in. And it was like, right, you do this, you do that, right, and another would be when you go into an Ofsted inspection, you get the call, you become a directive leader, because it's very fast paced and you need to achieve something by then. There's no point listening to 50 million views. You haven't got time and you need to achieve what you need to achieve. So you can't, it's about being able to move into those spaces, but actually only when you absolutely need to.
I was gonna. Do you know what? I'm so glad you mentioned about Ofsted inspection, because I was gonna ask. Do you know when you get the call? Is it a call or an email to say we're coming in?
No, it's a call.
It's a call. So do you know, like the night before? How do you prepare for that inspection? Let's say,
well, you don't know the night before. You know when the calls come in. The
call
timing.
you go and say, okay, right, just to let you know, Laura, Bob, we're coming in to do an inspection. We're gonna come on this day, or so. How do you prepare for that?
Well, my colleagues will tell you I prepare very badly. Because actually I believe that, and Ofsted say this themselves, although it puts local authorities under a lot of pressure because it's high stakes in Ofsted inspection. If the system is working in the best interest for children, they can call and you are ready. Because you can come in and see us how we are.
You've got nothing to worry about.
So, no. So that said, Ofsted have caught me off the hoof, I think, nearly in every inspection.
That's what I was going to say,
And you have to have a team around you that can quickly produce the evidence folder. Because the practice is the practice. Talking to social workers is talking to social workers. No amount of prep you can do to improve that practice within 2 weeks, which is what the beauty of unannounced inspections is. That's how it should be. I know some of my colleagues don't agree with me on that. But it's the preparation about the folders and the presentation and stuff, which most people do in advance. And I haven't always done in advance, let's
Yeah.
say. But the social workers and the children themselves will say how it is, and they will get you through the inspection. So you bet, you know, that's what you want to run. You want to be delivering good services to children.
What yourself, Bob?
Yeah, I think
Get a call.
it's again, isn't it? It's about if people are doing what they're doing, and I guess what happens from one inspection to the next, you've got to continuously sort of look at that. For me, it's again about, you know, practice will speak for itself.
Yeah.
So you've got to have things in place like audits and things like that. And I know they can be sometimes people like, oh gosh. But actually,
When I get that email, it's like, oh, God,
yeah, I know.
Another audit, flipping out.
But it's the only way, isn't it?
No,
that
no,
we
I'm
can
not. Just
evidence-
being honest with you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I hate audit. I don't like it at all. But it's a way of
Yeah.
obviously us being able to quality assure the work, because
Yeah.
sometimes you have to mark your own homework. Better that you know we're doing poor here, but let's
Yeah.
improve it. So by the time they do come, you're actually ready.
So from a systems point of view, isn't it? You're working out. You know your strength and your weaknesses, and you should be doing that. And you constantly work at that. And then you're hoping when they come that you can see that. And because I always know there's some great pieces of work go on, like you say.
Yeah.
But you know, will that be evidenced with what they look at? Will the young people say that? Will our children, young people, sort of say how they and at the end of the day, that's what's also important. So it's again not losing touch with that.
Yeah,
They're important, you know, getting their views, listening to what they're saying, and the professional network. Because I think, you know, if not, I'm a great believer about people set narratives, don't they? And they have this narrative about you, and that's why I'll always confront those and because I think sometimes they're not fair narratives. You know, people might have had a bad experience from one particular social worker or you know, a particular team, and then if you don't address it, it becomes the narrative, and before you know it, that's what everyone's talking about. And I think it's so fair. But that's a good illustration of life in general, isn't it? How people form a particular view and won't move from that. So it's
But if you
important.
also think about it, the children that we work with are the most vulnerable children in our society.
Yeah.
They deserve the highest level of quality assurance.
Yeah.
Whether that's internal, external, by a regulator. They deserve that.
Yeah.
They deserve to be checked upon that they're getting good services, because they're the most vulnerable in our society.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you both, you know, when you were progressing up the ladder and up the chain, did you both ever have any kind of mentors who were mentoring you whilst you were going through? And how important were those mentors in terms of where you kind of are today? Let me start with Bob, and then Laura. Yeah.
Well, what's funny, I nearly had Laura as my
Is it?
Yeah, which would have been good. I've never really understood that, to be honest, but I do get it now. I've got a mentor now, but I only recently, and she's great, in a sense of, because it's always somebody who's got experience and somebody who can. I guess, you know, it's that, like any learning, isn't it? Sometimes they can there's questions you want to ask sometimes that you think, God, you know, like I said, when you're learning and always learning, I don't really understand this, or how do you deal with this? And what that mentor's good for is just, you know, giving you a view of how they dealt with those and going through that. So I'd never really thought about it, but I didn't have a mentor, as I said, until I was in this role. But actually, I've really enjoyed it, because practice-based, they're a former DCS, they kind of very experienced across the board. So I'm really pleased. And like I said, it would have been Laura if I hadn't got my current mentor. So
What yourself, Laura?
Me, not. Well, first of all, I introduced a practice model which had a lot of coaching in for frontline staff and team managers. So the model breeded coaching. So if I'm going to introduce a model like that, I better be leading by example. And I went on a practice leaders course before I became director of safeguarding, and you get a coach there, and had a fantastic coach who really challenged me. So coaching and mentoring are different, and I've had both. Who really challenged me on how would I have grip in a massive organisation. Because my borough was quite small that I was director of safeguarding in. And then I've been on the aspirant DCS course, got a mentor through them. So I do have mentoring now, actually, and have had coaching and understand the difference. And I also do a lot of mentoring, particularly for Black and Global Majority staff, in terms, and particularly women, actually, no offence, guys. But, you know, who want to move up and who want to, and they come with their reflections and how they can improve, whether it's their practice or themselves or their leadership. But I'm a real believer in coaching and mentoring, because you need people to reflect with, and you need people to bounce ideas off.
Yeah, no, that's really good, because I've got my own mentor as well, because I've got my aspirations. I hope in years to come I'll be sitting where, you know, you both are sitting, and I think it's good to kind of have it, because as you said, they can also help you on your journey, and it's nice to know that you've got a safe space for that. Can I ask you, and please don't think I'm being cheeky, so you know, like all the other directors across the London local authorities, do you all have like a WhatsApp group where you all just talk? Oh, you do? Yeah. Like, where you all just talk, and you're like, Laura, how you doing? Bob, how you doing?
We have the London DCS WhatsApp group. You know,
you see, guys, they got a WhatsApp group. You know, you see, I've been burning to ask that question. They got a WhatsApp group. No, but that's nice though.
We got a WhatsApp group for everything.
That's really good.
And then we have regular meetings as a London network.
That's really good.
And then there are national meetings that you can go to. And obviously, if you're on courses, like I'm now on the new DCS course, you get a WhatsApp group for that. And, and people just put information on, ask really questions. Good. Nothing's a stupid question. Reach out to each other. And people are really supportive. You'll have your select few who you're closer to.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've always utilised it, because it's a network of information and of informal mentoring or coaching.
That's really good. That's really good. One of the things I wanted to ask is supervision. Who does your supervision? Because obviously mine's my service manager, but do you have your supervision?
Yeah.
Well, as you move up, they more call it one-to-ones, because you can't be clinically. I can clinically supervise my director of safeguarding because I'm a qualified social worker.
Yeah.
But a DCS doesn't need to be a qualified social worker. I can't really offer clinical supervision to the director of education or the director of transformation or you know, the director of clinical practice. So it becomes less like supervision and more like a one-to-one.
That's
and there is a difference.
You know, I just thought it continued all the way up, that, you know, you'd have supervision all the way. Obviously you've got mentoring, but I would have thought, Laura and Bob, that you would still
it depends what you mean by supervision.
I don't mean like
case
supervision. So I don't mean like case supervision, but it's like, you know, your personal supervision.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah.
Okay. That is very, very interesting though, but you don't call it supervision though.
I do with my staff, but most people would call it a one-to-one because you're not clinically supervising their work, because you may not be an expert in that field. Director of safeguarding, I was doing supervision, I'm sure.
Yeah. Another thing I wanted to ask is that you mentioned Laura and Bob are Ofsted earlier. So what I want to ask is that, as DCSs, of course, you've probably, you know, worked in authorities whereby you're on a journey. So what would you kind of say in terms of your vision, if you're working for a local authority who's going under an improvement journey, how do you set out what it is you want to see within the next year or next 2 years? Because obviously, all know here, we're all social workers in terms of like the pressures that are on the ground. But if you get that report and it's like, okay, right, your requires improvement, but how do you, when you read through, might be like, okay, right, they've said this, but actually this is what kind of I want to see. How do you kind of make that judgment for yourselves as DCSs?
Well, I mean, you've probably got more experience in this than me, but what Ofsted is it's an important judgment and it's an important reflection on the organisation, but it's only one reflection. As a leader, you know what the other reflections are. Your children, young people will know what a different reflection are. Your partners, you know, the staff. So for me, it's always been about understanding the practice, the quality assurance that goes on, the feedback, the complaints, the compliments, what your partners are saying, what the safeguarding partnership is saying, how the system works. You know, you're on that, you know, that journey. However, I would say there are really important things that you can do to provide pace behind that improvement journey. One is the introduction of a practice model and a practice framework. I'm a great believer in that. So the whole organisation is working towards within that model and within that relational model. Another is an open organisation where people can speak about what's going on, and huge amounts of quality assurance will provide pace on. I know you hate audits, but it's not only about audits. You know, like lots of quality assurance will provide pace behind that improvement journey. and the vision. Why do you want to improve? To provide better services for children. And that is from one to the other, and you just never take your eye off that.
Bob?
Yeah, I think Laura answered it very well. I think, again, when you've had your ILACs, isn't it, it'll identify all the areas of weakness and strength as well. But then it's about working on those areas again, and we have the self-evaluation that we have to do. And in a way, it doesn't stop there. It's constantly, like you were saying, when you're on that journey, it's about making sure so it's not putting your eggs in one basket. It's kind of looking across a holistic view and thinking, where are our strengths, where are our weaknesses? Why is that a strength and this is a weakness? So how do we marry it all up, really? And it is important. Ultimately, for us, it's about for children and young people, because actually, you need that rating, but also sometimes you just need to make sure we don't become complacent. Because I think people can sit and be complacent. I always think for local authorities that are outstanding, that's great, but wow, that's a tough. You've got to,
because you have to regularly meet that standard every single time the inspection comes through.
And I think sometimes that's the difficulty. So I don't think it's like you say. We do need the checkers, and we do need that. But actually, it means that we're working within something that we can ensure for children and young people, not just now but in the future. That they're getting something that I would expect, from my own children or young people.
You also have to think about, be confident in yourself as a leader to know what's important. So I'll give you an example of that. They're getting rid of it now in the national dashboard, but for years we have measured the conversion between a strategy discussion to an ICPC, and it's got to be 15 days. I have never, ever cared about that indicator, and I have been very upfront to Ofsted and anyone who will challenge me on it. I don't care if a conference is on day 16 and 17, as long as the mum and dad and aunt are there and all the partners are there. I don't care if my percentage, in fact, the borough I used to work for, we were outstanding. We had the worst percentage in the whole country, because I don't care about that indicator. That isn't going to improve a child's life. But Ofsted or DFE don't measure how many of our looked after children are placed with their siblings. We have to measure how stable the placement is, which is very important. How many moves a child have, again, very important. How many people are living local, again, very important. But do we ask ourselves how many children are placed with their own sibling? Now, if you went and asked kids, one of the most important things to them, probably to me,
keep me in the family.
If you can't keep me in the family, I want to be with my brother or sister. So there are certain things that aren't measured or aren't regulated by Ofsted that I believe are very important. Another one would be another one would be, which is really important, an overall indicator for something, a re-referral rate to social care, and you're really good, you're at 15%, that's great, that's a good re-referral rate. But what's it look like for every child? Because I can tell you for my white children, that's 10%, and for my black Caribbean children, that's 22%. So, but you haven't measured me on that. You're not asking me what it means for black and global majority children or females or older children. So we should be setting the standard and bar higher than what our regulator and DFE measure us on.
But that's really, really good, Laura, to hear, because obviously, you both, obviously, in general, when it comes to performance and stats, you're always going to get those weekly updates from your assistant director, heads of service. And obviously, it's nice to kind of hear that from you, that, Laura, that certain things for you don't matter, because it's more about the quality, because we're working with families. And we know that families and people that we work with are not just a percentage. And I think that's the thing sometimes for me when it comes to Ofsted, although I'm not in that senior leadership role yet, that I think sometimes they're a bit detached. So I think it's nice to kind of hear you kind of say that actually, well, even if it's gone out of timescale, but actually, who is actually part of the conference? Right, we've got the professionals there, but are there family members there? Or what you said about, children being placed with their siblings, that is what's important. And I think it's good to kind of see you as a DCS challenging back, because they're not in the local authorities, they're not seeing the children. You're responsible for that. You know what the key performance indicators are. And I think that's the thing that we hear a lot from social workers that, all right, fine, fair enough. Assessment might be out of time scale. It might be 46, 47, 48 days, but actually I've done a good piece of work within that time period, which has kind of made sure that actually this case is not going to conference. It might be a child in need, or actually it might be a case that's closed because I've been able to rally around the professional network, rally around the families to kind of make sure that, you know, the child stays within the home. And I think it's good, Laura, that you've said that. What about yourself, Bob?
No, I
it's
totally
good.
agree.
It's good that you push back.
Yeah, but I totally agree with what you're saying. If it's a good piece of work and you can demonstrate that, because you're right, some things aren't, you know, don't sort of fit into that time
scale
frame.
Yeah.
But actually, if you can demonstrate that quality of work, then it speaks for itself.
And have a rationale to why.
Yeah.
You don't want the whole department thinking I can just take 50 days to do an assessment because I've got no rationale. You've got to have a clear reason because actually families do deserve for their assessment to be given to them after 45 days. They don't want it taking months and months. And,
Like
you know,
back
not
in the day.
not understanding why you're still involved or why you need to still be involved. And I think, I mean, I know Bob and I think really similarly on this. You know, when people talk about KPIs, I don't like that really. I don't like the word performance. Now, talking upwards...
You hearing this, guys? This is good.
Talking
this
upwards,
is good, you know.
I'll talk about performance.
Laura, can you say that back into your camera, please? Please, Laura, please say that again into your camera.
So when you talk upwards, you have to talk about performance.
Yeah.
It is about really performance of your service.
Yes.
But when you talk about numbers, you're talking about every number is a child. So I can tell my performance at the moment, 75% of my children on a child protection plan are persistent absenteeism. So, you know, 10%, they're missing 10% of school. I don't even want to hear the 10%. I want to hear half a day a week. I want to hear 3 out of 4 children aren't attending, are missing half a day a week. Because you have to break it down. Every stat, every number is an actual child.
Yes.
And I think I call it practice data, which I know you do, you know, you've got that mentality too. I don't call it performance data.
Yeah.
Guys, you're hearing that, yeah? Practice data. I love what Laura, I love what you said, you know. Go on, Bob, sorry.
No, but I was just going to, that's good. And my corporate director, I'm using his words as opposed to mine. But he's right, but I always say it. But behind that data, the reason we say about that is a child.
Yeah.
And so that's it reminds people. So just remember that. That's why it's important if children are missing, young people are going missing, or they've not been visited, things like that. It's not about the KPI. It's about that child. And also to that family, there's that respect and disrespect. Because if you think about it, if we're involved, I'm a great believer, we should only be involved where necessary.
Yeah.
And if you are involved, you know, there's something disrespectful about that, isn't it? If you're expecting, or you've got expectation of them, of a parent, to behave or deliver in a certain way, and yet we're not.
Yeah,
we're not doing that. You know, it's being, you know, those things for me are about lateness as well. You know, often if you ask anybody, and it's still there in research today, if they say about their social work, a lot of young people say they're either late or they don't turn up. For me, that's just...
What's the message you send in?
Yeah. Do you know what I'm saying? Because it says it's about worth, isn't it? And what we forget about disadvantage and any form of discrimination in general is that's where that sits. And so you have to think about your behaviour sometimes. And we've got a lot of power. You know what I mean? I'm just saying generally as social workers and about you, and understand that when practicing, because families still have a view that you know, if we get involved, we're going to take your children away, and that's not the case. And I just think for me, so it's a real thing. That isn't why I came into the work.
No.
So,
And also I think performance data can have unintended consequences.
Yeah.
So if your performance data, one of your stat, 93%, everyone's like, brilliant, move on. But what's happening with those 7%?
Yeah.
And are those 7% that is late or is not being visited or didn't go to or whatever it is, are those 7%, or on a plan for 2 years, are those 7%, is there a theme? Is it domestic violence? Is it parental mental health? Do we need to then tailor service deliveries?
Yeah.
Because the only reason you measure these data is to understand whether your service is still delivering the things it needs to deliver and whether you need to tailor things better.
Yeah. What I want to ask you both, final reflections. What is your hope for social work in the future? What would you like to see, say, in the next 10 years about social work? What would you like to see that's different?
Well, that's a difficult question.
Very difficult to answer, but just from your end.
What I'd like to see, I think it's changed for the better so much. Definitely since I qualified. I mean, we didn't have newly qualified social work courses. We didn't have ASYEs. You walked into the job, you got a caseload of 35, and you got on with it. And, you know, sometimes I shudder. I was a relational social worker and I did my best, but I shudder at what those families must have experienced from me, a newly qualified social worker, with really complex court proceedings and stuff. You know, I feel bad, basically. So I think social worker has got markedly better. I think having practice models in, I'm a believer in that, has made everyone in the system feel safer and feel that there's, you know, safe uncertainty. We can never get safe certainty, but safe uncertainty. But in the next 10 years, what I really hope is that people see social work as the best profession in the world. I mean, I love social work.
Speaking to existence, absolutely.
I love social work. So it is such a brilliant job. It's challenging. It's different. It's, you know, variable. It's never, ever boring. You meet so many people, you know, you get the rewards when you're improving lives. And I don't mean dramatically improving, even those little changes, seeing kids smile, seeing kids being settled, seeing parents turn their life around with you empowering them. It's the best job in the world. But no one at school knows that. No one really before school or thinks in their life, the best job in the world is social work. And it is.
Yeah. What yourself, Bob?
Yeah, I agree. I'm like I said, I'm passionate about social work, and I just think it is moving in a different direction for the better.
Yeah.
I think you've got to remember at my age when we were coming through, there was a lot of the anti-discrimination sort of practices, and people seem to forget the importance of that. And I just think now you're getting people coming through who challenge some of those norms. Remember, a lot of the theories and a lot of the models we work with, very white Eurocentric, that didn't fit with if you were working with a particular family or, you know, pick a family from another background that you didn't understand. And I think there's a lot of challenge now. And I just think, you know, what I hope is some of the new social workers or what we're seeing will carry that on and understand why we came into work to make the difference, and not just to see it as a 9-to-5 job, because I don't think you can. Nobody comes into that, but also I think sometimes people come into the work who kind of think, actually, is this what it's about? I guess what I'm also saying is you have to know yourself, because what I use the term wounded healer, and I think there's often, back in the day when I was practicing, there were a lot of people who came in to sort themselves out. And I'm a great believer, you can't do that, because how can you be able to assist others if you've got things? That's not to say things come up that can often upset you, but it's about recognising that and realising. And I do think that whole social pedagogy way of working that's how it's getting better, is, you know, people already in the work understanding when you get younger social workers coming in, what they can often give. Do you see what I mean? They can just bring a different
new generation.
You with me? And you've got to embrace that. If you don't, then I think we'll be dinosaurs.
Laura, Bob, I want to thank you both so much. This has been such an amazing episode. Like, I'm so proud that I've actually been able to have senior leaders to come on, because I think it's going to be good for the audience and for social workers and students watching, that you get to see senior leaders who are, you know, visual and come on this podcast. So thank you very much for coming on, for bringing your expertise and your knowledge. And guys, listen, you know where to find myself and Rob. Wait, have you liked and subscribed yet? Have you liked and subscribed it yet? Have you liked it, Bob? Have you subscribed yet?
Well, I'm always looking. I'm a bit of a tight one when it says subscribe. I think, is this going to cost me?
No, it's free, you know. It's free.
That's the only reason I won't ever subscribe to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but listen, you're going to subscribe, isn't it?
Yeah, we are.
So guys, they're going to subscribe. So you like, subscribe, and share. But thank you very much, and we'll see you soon.